Good afternoon, Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Thursday, October the 3rd. Let's begin with some court action yesterday. Charles Starks, who was fired as a Little Rock police officer for the fatal shooting of Bradley Blackshear in a traffic stop last year, filed a court appeal of his firing yesterday in circuit court. The Civil Service Commission had upheld his firing by the chief, Keith Humphrey. Starks gets a new trial beginning to end in circuit court, which will decide if the firing was justified under the rules. Starks can be expected to bring up the fact that a number of other officers in the police department thought his actions were justified that day. The Pulaski prosecuting attorney said he had done no wrong in shooting that day. And also they'll bring up the question, I'm sure, of the mayor's interference in this matter and his pressure on the chief to fire the officer. Elsewhere today, the Urban Institute filed reports on two subjects of public assistance in Arkansas, both of which require work rules for recipients. One is the Medicaid expansion. One is the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance, popularly known as food stamps. A study of both these programs shows that work rules just really don't work. They were poorly implemented in both cases. People didn't know about them, were confused by them. They lost coverage as a result. And here's the big problem about work rules. It's really difficult for the poorest of the poor, people who have a lot of disabilities of various sorts, not necessarily physical or mental, but poverty and home situations. It's hard for them to get good work. These programs are doomed to fail. We knew that already, but another report on that might bring some sense of concern to the Arkansas legislature. Doubtful, but we can hope. The Arkansas Supreme Court today said that it was going to suspend temporarily all proceedings in Circuit Judge Wendell Griffen's court on the matter of an appeal of a rejection of a medical marijuana permit by Carpenter Farms. The issue here isn't so much the case. The state attorney general thinks that the state should be immune from this lawsuit under sovereign immunity, but in the course of it, she said Wendell Griffen should be removed from all cases involving her office because he's rude to members of her staff. He says that's not true. He said he's hard on the staff because they don't answer questions well and they're sometimes not prepared for court. Well, in any event, for temporarily, the court is going to suspend action in that case where discovery was pending, but it's not yet ruled on her request that he be thrown off all her cases. That's pending. Amber Geiger, the Dallas police officer who fatally shot the Harding University graduate Botham Jean when she mistakenly walked into his apartment thinking it was her own, got a 10-year sentence yesterday from a Dallas jury. Some people thought that was too much. Some thought it wasn't enough. The brother of the dead young man from St. Lucia gave the defendant a hug and said he was sorry about everything that had happened. She did too. University of Arkansas has announced that its enrollment this year at the Fayetteville campus dropped slightly, less than 1%, did better than a lot of colleges in the state, but the chancellor says they're going to have to look to strategies in the future to do something about the fact that the population of high school students is declining. It'll be hard to keep up growth, and growth is important because it pays the salaries of a lot of people at UA. Well, this was an interesting fact I dug up yesterday. Part of the huge growth in the University of Arkansas enrollment has come from out of state, particularly the state of Texas. Last year they accounted for almost 31% of the entering class of freshmen at UA. Well, that percentage was down to 29% this year. The reason being that there was an 11% drop in students coming from Texas, so that's a factor in future growth as well. Texas universities are also experiencing drops, so maybe it's easier to get in Texas than it used to be. The Little Rock City Board last night adopted a tree ordinance for the Pulaski Heights neighborhood. It was a compromise measure. People are afraid that in the course of tearing down smaller houses and building big new ones, they're denuding the lots of trees, and this ordinance will require some planting on those lots and some attempt at sustaining trees. This was a compromise. Some conservative landowners don't like regulations generally. They think this is an effort to limit the sizes of homes in the heights by means of putting a tree ordinance in place. There's some dark suggestions this might run afoul of new state law that's meant to limit cities on how they may regulate housing development. We shall see, but in any event, we do have a tree ordinance. Now, you can at least move into your house before you've replanted new trees where they've been cut down. Yesterday, earlier this week, Tuesday I guess it actually was, a federal court jury convicted Brian Baer of Little Rock of 5 felony charges related to guns and weapons. He's going to serve at least 45 years, the U.S. attorney says. Sounds like a good thing. It would seem that methamphetamines and a machine gun, which Baer possessed and used to hit his the mother of his children are not a very good match. Great reading I'd recommend in the New York Review of Books. You can find the link on arkansasblog.com. The Ghost of Elaine. It's a great historical account of the massacre of hundreds of black tenant farmers 100 years ago for trying to organize to get decent prices out of the overlords that for whom they farm their land. This is not about the recent memorials and some of the local tension that arose between competing groups there. It's simply about the event itself, and it's a terrible thing. The point is that white supremacy, racial discrimination, and oppression of organized labor continues today 100 years later. That hasn't changed much. It's a piece worth reading. And finally, talking about crazy, Donald Trump gets crazier every day. He's mad. He's acting mad in the mentally deranged sense, I think. Today he said that China ought to investigate the Bidens because, well, they're just bad people and just crooks. He's clearly upset about the impeachment proceedings and now giving people open reasons in public comments at news gatherings for why he probably should leave office. I say resist. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.